Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is another pre-show post-edit. For those of you just tuning in, this is part 2 of my interview with Sarinteal on his characters, Aldmeri lore, and RP, and at the time, the newly released Summerset expansion. I had originally thought of chopping this episode up into 3 parts, like I said in the last installment, but now I'm going to settle on 2 instead, so there'll just be part 1 and part 2. The reason being is that I couldn't exactly find a good cutting point without making the continuity of this episode feel disjointed all the same. So with that being said, here is part 2, and the rest of our episode. At some point down the line, I'll probably combine these 2 parts into one wholesome episode, but for now, please enjoy. If you have not listened to episode 1 and have just jumped straight ahead, I highly recommend that you go back and give it a listen. As for the rest of you, dear audience, we'll be picking up with a small rehash of a topic. That is, Aldmeri and their pursuit of perfection. Enjoy. So, continuing where we left off, one of the things that it's, I suppose, interesting and yet hard for me to wrap my head around is the Aldmeri's, I suppose, search for perfection. In Shoddy Cast's lore video about the Aldmeri, he says that, if you have an Aldmeri look at a work of art, they'll be able to point out every flaw in it, and you can't blame them because they've been around for so long, honing their craft. It's what they do. So how is it that these Aldmeri can all chase after perfection when it can be argued that perfection of itself, it's an illusion?
Because every Aldmeri believes that they began as perfect entities. So in their mind, it does exist.
Can you expand upon that?
I can.
They began as perfect entities as the Elno phase. Is that what you're referring to?
As the Etada, yeah.
As the Etada.
That's not even how it's pronounced. I've never actually said it aloud, but E-T-A-A-D, Etada, yeah.
I think there's an apostrophe in there somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
After the E-T.
But yeah, so they were in the state of being, a state of what they prefer, what they call perfection, and from there they became imperfect.
Yes.
They want to go back to that.
They do. I mean, you could argue that perfection is both. I mean, they have. You could say that there are 2 states of perfection in the Aldmeri mindset. There is back when they were the Etada, and then when they were, quote-unquote, on Aldmeris, where Aldmeris represents elven unification when they were all one, when there was order and stability and everything was static, to say. The idea of perfection actually has a name among the Aldmeri, and that is Alaxon.
You can sort of get that Buddhism feel. In order to achieve a state of perfection, you have to pursue a certain path. From what you say, it sounds like Alaxon, and then from Buddhism's roots, I suppose you would look at it and say that's the Eightfold Path. Would that be fair to say?
I guess you could do. I'm not an expert on, by any means, on religion or an anthropologist or anything like that, so I'm not exactly going to tell you all of the historical parallels between the Aldmeri and the various human societies, but I think that there's a great deal of, which is showcased in the Summerset expansion, there's a great deal of Christianity rolled into there, actually, in their religion, that heaven is, perfection to a Christian, and to return there is to... I don't know. It's if you are in heaven, are you perfect? I suppose is the question.
I guess that would develop into what does heaven entail. And I mean, if you were to look at a very medieval way of looking at it, particularly from, say, the Divine Comedy's heaven would be a state of perfection. However, to get there, you'd have to, go through purgatory. And if you are eternally damned, well, then there's no hope whatsoever. So I guess you could argue that, yeah, heaven is perfect, and once you reach there, you've achieved a state of perfection. But it's hard for me to imagine essentially going back to a state of perfection, given the way the Inuic and the Patamaic forces are always at an interplay with each other, which is, I suppose, what forms the basis of time moving forward. So, unless you're taking what Mr. Kirkbride has said about the lore for law, can the Altmer return to that state? That's something that I have a hard time understanding. I don't. Well, let's get into Summerset a little bit. What does Alaxon entail? Tell me about it.
Okay, well, right. I'll just kind of start from the top. So, Alaxon in the Aldmeri tongue means perfection, as I said. And the path to Alaxon is the Aldmeri principle among any private or public figure of Summerset. It's the endless pursuit of perfection in one's craft or lifestyle, or most importantly, I suppose, perfection in their heritage, honouring who they are, where they came from, and where they're going to eventually go. Each Altmer, when they reach a certain age, and the law book indicates, I'm not saying it's absolutely every time, but one law book that's new to Somerset indicates that when an Altmer reaches the age of 18, they're presented with something called the Praxic Talisman, or an Alaxon Sphere, or I don't know how to pronounce this. It's Kalian. Kalian? Yeah. And these gifts are kind of given to them by the Ascended, sometimes by an individual known as the Ascendant Curate. And these are kind of representatives of the Hall of High Ascendancy. I just had to look that one up. So the exact description of these talismans is that they are fashioned from kind of this milky, quartzy glass, and they're easily damaged and broken unless you meticulously take care of them. And when they are given this talisman, the Altman makes an oath to safeguard this talisman at all times, any time. It must not be damaged at any point. It must, if it's going to represent their perfection, it must remain perfect. And so long as it does, it represents their complete standing within the Altmer society. So you take a look at an Altmer. They probably don't wear these talismans around their neck or anything like that, but they will be accessible in some capacity, I would expect, because you could bloody toss it off a cliff and never think about it. And if nobody wants to ever see it, well, for all they know, you've got a perfect Alaxon sphere. But an Altmer with an undamaged talisman indicates that that individual is tempered, careful, and securely on the path to Alaxon. Which is everything an Altmer should be in the eyes of the Sapiarchs, the Scrolls of Praxis, and their peers.
Okay, and with these talismans, how they hold on to it for as long as they can? Has it been discovered if these are something hereditary or something that's is it something like a family heirloom, like this was my father's, now this is yours, or is it something that sort of is a rite of passage?
That's a good question. I don't know. We aren't really given that much lore on it. As you'd think with a new expansion, we'd be given a lot more than we have been given. But I think, as ever, it's up to interpretation. Ideally, the Altmer would hold on to these for as long as possible. I would say, but you could say that they're buried with them. When an Altmer dies, they're supposed to aetherius, and it makes sense that their kind of their greatest worldly possession in the form of the sphere goes with them. It's varied. You could say anything you want. It may vary between families. Maybe a family takes great pride in how careful they are with their spheres, so they could have a vault containing thousands of them.
True. It's something that I think an RPer could be able to spin and make it work to however they see fit, so long as it fits within that framework of, what the lore book says.
Absolutely. I mean, my guild, when the Mirific Eye, when somebody joins properly, there are two kind of stages to joining the Mirific Eye. There's when you're the initiate and you're just kind of learning the ropes, and you're doing everything that everyone else does, and you get the same measure of respect, I suppose, from an in-character perspective. But once you decide that you want to join the guild properly, we've always had this thing called the Crystalline Oath, where an Altmer swears upon a memory stone. Using their own words, they swear to whatever oath they so choose. And these words bind into the stone to create a crystal, which, as it so happens, we didn't know this has been done for years now, and we didn't know that the Altmer had these talismans from a lore perspective. But I suppose you could say it's the Mirific Eye's version of a Praxic talisman.
That's got to be a confidence boost when you guys learned that was a thing, and you're like, oh, we were doing this all along. I like that.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's a lot of that throughout Summerset where I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess right.
Mm.
I think Mr. Lawrence Stick has been taking a gander at the Mirific Eye roleplay. He's been sneaking into our homesteads, and he's been listening to the roleplay, and he's been thinking, you know what? These Nazi elves, they know what's up.
He sees you when you're RPing. He knows when you're awake. That sort of thing, Mr. Schick.
You know what? I'm just going to detour briefly. When I first made Sarinteal, I gave him the title of Archon. There was no previous lore specification that such a rank existed in the in the Altmer community. Obviously, there's Archon the place in Arconia, but aside from that, there was no rank. I just kind of inferred it, and then about a year ago, I decided, you know what? I kind of feel like I'm pushing the boundaries a bit too far in one direction. There's no need for me to have this unique title. I'd rather have something that's established in the lore firmly, so I can have a very this is what my character does, rather than this airy fairy. Oh, we could be doing this, he could be doing that. It's a mystery. So I changed his title to Magister. Because I knew for a fact that there are Magisters who work within the Crystal Tower, and that's where he's visited there enough times. He's learned there enough times to be considered the Magister today. So he was effectively promoted, and even in this dialogue from his superior, they said, you know what, we're going to get rid of this random title because nobody knows what you are actually meant. Nobody knows what you do. We tell people you're an Archon. People are like, what's that? So, for a year, I'm very content with this title, and Summerset rolls around, and we get a look at the Crystal Tower. Not a Magister in sight, but you know what is there? There's a bloody Archon. There's a bloody Archon's Grove in Summerset. So I've gone ahead and I've changed this long-standing title that I was very, very pleased with. Archon is a title that I've used since my time in WoW, and I disposed of that, and I chose Magister, one that I'm not quite as fond of, but it works, and it was all for fucking nothing. So I don't get it right every time, or if I do, I try and correct myself and then get it wrong.
So it sounds to me, scrolling back to that bit about perfection. So with the way Tamriel is and the inherent and what's going on with the government of Summerset, which in and of itself is a bucket of worms to open. If we were to look at the dynamic between Iran and Alwyn Norway, I'm not sure if I said that name right.
I haven't even learned how to spell it yet.
Yeah, it's got two W's. That's what I remember. But okay, going back to that perfection bit, if all Altmer are spending all this time and dedicate years and years and years to this pursuit of perfection, what's that say about experience and the crystallization, or sorry, the fluidity of knowledge? What I mean by that here is, I suppose this is also a tangent, is that there's this thing in psychology called the curve of forgetting. Like if I were to tell you, oh yeah, I'm wearing black boxer briefs, and then 2 weeks later I was like, hey, do you remember what I told you 2 weeks ago about my boxer briefs? I can't exactly remember. You wouldn't be able to. I don't think you'd be able to correctly recall that information. Does that make sense?
I wouldn't, but an outlaw would.
Could they though? Because an Alma that lives for 200 years,
Allegedly, they have near perfect memory.
allegedly they have near perfect memory.
Yeah.
Wow, that is very hard for me to believe.
Why? I mean, the outlaw are just different. There's a reason why they're considered the other. There's a reason why they think themselves so much better, and it's because there are elements to them that there are very strong parts to the Altmer. I'm gonna say body. There's fucking duck. What's it called? The Altmer have very specific skills and they're very strong, and they tailor their community, they tailor their personal preferences to favor these skill sets.
Okay. But at the same time, just like every other race, there is legend and myth surrounding them, of which, if they had perfect memory, not so much legend and myth would be surrounding. So I think that so it seems to me that the imperfection of memory would be present there. It seems unlikely to me that they allegedly have perfect memory.
Well, I mean, they strive for perfection in everything. Why not memory?
Because memory is a bit of a fleeting subject when you think about it. You can only the brain's capacity, whatever creature or whatever have you, can only store so much before other pieces of information start to push it out. That's just the foundation of biology. And perhaps it is a bit unfair to say, why the hell are you bringing biology into a fantasy universe? Well, I bring it in there because it's a basis, a universal law by which all universes, be it imaginary or real, has to stem from.
I won't argue with biology.
I guess where I'm going with this is to say that I think the idea of having a good long-term memory, that I can accept. But to say that they remember everything, I mean, I understand when you say allegedly, sure, but I don't know. It's that's also hard for me to get my head wrapped around, because then that if memory was perfect, and believe me, I wish memory was perfect, that would give rise to less construed or misinterpretation of information, or less what's the word for it? I don't want to say misconstrued, but less fudging of perception of the happenstances that happened around the universe. So if I were to use like an example, Aldmeri, if I remember correctly, sank into the ocean, was it?
Aldmeri is a tricky one because people say it was an island, people say it was a state of being, and other people say that Aldmeris, Yukunda, all those sinking islands are metaphors.
Right. So even then, there's a hard to reach consensus there.
Yeah.
I guess the point I was trying to make is that eventually an Altmer is going to forget. And I think this gives rise to an imperfection. And if I were to use an example from another fantasy universe, Tolkien's Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, when they're in the mines of Moria, he's like, I have no memory of this place. He's an ancient being that's been around for hundreds or thousands of years, depending on how you look at it. And he's wandered throughout Middle-earth for a long time. That's his thing. He knows where the mines of Moria is. He's been through them before, but he can't remember that one instance of a place. It's a one minute detail. So it's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, oh yeah, they have all these skills that they have spent years and years and years and years of honing. And I'm not going to dispute with that fact, because if you do something for years and years and years, for example, you and your Photoshop skills, you're going to have it down to a T, sure.
Mm-hmm.
What I do dispute is that they will degrade over time if they are not in use. And that, for me, if a Altmer has many different skills, then there would be a lot of discrepancy in the skill maintenance. Does that make sense? Have I lost you? I think I might have lost half the listeners on this huge mind experiment.
I don't know. I think the mistake is putting too much emphasis on the nature of perfection. I don't think perfection is necessarily the important part. It's the pursuit of perfection that's important. It's
okay.
It's aspiring. It's doing your best. being a good sport.
Right. And that's universal to all culture.
But it's absolutely fundamental to the Altmer. If you think about it, an Altmer can have that talisman, their Alaxon sphere. They can have it shattered in front of them if they do not. For instance, if they're a jewel crafter and they start producing work that's not as good as it used to be, or as good as people perceive it used to be, they will get their sphere smashed. And they must work very hard and for a very long time to restore themselves to where they were. There's a story called The Price of Praxis, where a lot of this lore comes from in regards to the near perfect memory, to the Alaxon sphere, everything such as that. And this fella, he gets his smashed, and he spends 30 years piecing together his sphere, shard by shard. Nothing else. He does nothing else apart from obviously feed and the necessities. And he gets back to that spot that he was at, although much, 30 years older and in a much worse position.
But then again, 30 years is this goes back to that man and mer divided perception. But is that really a lot of time?
30 years is 30 years.
Okay, yeah, all right, no arguments there. Okay.
That's all I'll say. It's not, it doesn't make up as much of a percentage of an Altmer's life as it does a human's life, but
right.
The hours spent are still hours.
Right. Moving right along then, because we briefly touched upon it, and this will probably be conversation number 1 of the meat and potatoes of this episode. Talk to me about Summerset. It has been out for a week now. Has it been a week? Yeah, it's been a week.
Thereabouts.
Yeah. As of this recording, it's been out for a week. And you're an Altmer role player. Why don't you give me your review of it? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Where do you think it fell flat?
I thought it was, all in all, the chapter's great. It's fantastic. I think it's head and shoulders above Morrowind, and I'm sure even a Dunmer role player could come along and attest the same, because you look at something like Vivek, the city, and it's honest to God, it's my least favourite city in the game. There are obviously parts of Morrowind that are fantastic, but overall, we were retreading old ground, and it wasn't as novel as the first time. With Summerset, everything's new. Now, the architecture, at first, there were some grumblings about it. Cities aren't made out of glass, and there isn't insect wings, and just the whole, like, it doesn't match up to lore. And I do agree with that. I would have liked at the very least, I would have liked for more architecture revolving around coral. They make a big deal about coral, especially in Cloud Rest, and you see barely any of it. I mean, you see barely any of bloody Cloud Rest at all. It is just a trial. So there are areas that such as Cloud Rest, such as the diversity of the architecture that could be improved, but that diversity is also inherent to the Altmer. I mean, I think it's in the handbook, the guidebook to the Empire.
The pocket guide to the Empire.
Pocket guide, that's the one. Yeah, there's a fella in that who laments Aldmeri architecture is very samey. It's too rigid. It's too symmetrical. It's all the same. And while each city is varied in its layout, and I don't feel like I'm running through the same place over and over again, there is that sense, and in a positive way, of uniformity. Everything is very precise, very sharp, very tall. You don't get that kind of organic feeling that you would have got from a coral city. But all in all, I'd say that it's positive. The actual layout of Summerset itself, how it's portrayed, how everything is portrayed, really, I think it was pretty much right on the money, bar a few, minor hiccups. My issue with it lies in how they showcase the society and how it functions. We get a great window into how they work through the books. I mean, I mentioned the price of praxis, and I mentioned the ascendants who bestow these talismans onto the people of Summerset when they come of age. Now, we never meet a single ascendant in Summerset. We never go to the Hall of High Ascendancy. We never see an Alaxon sphere, and it's such a shame that the wall between lore and the game itself, the world represented, is growing as high as the Aldmeri architecture itself.
Do you think if you had the chance to rewrite some of Summerset, what would you change?
Rewrite it? I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think. I would have made crabs a rideable mount.
I can't tell if you're fucking with me or if you're serious.
No, I'm serious. Yeah.
Okay.
I would have made crabs rideable.
All right. Well, I guess there's something to be said about crabs there. Why exactly?
Why not? We've got these. Why not?
Okay. All right. I mean, we have dwarven mounts.
You can just imagine sideways scuttling crabs up the side of Eton Mere, up into Cloud Rest and stuff like that. You've got this city made out of coral on top of a mountain, where the air is thin and people are weird. And why are they riding horses?
Well, I would imagine because horses are a mainstay animal for when it comes to traveling.
I guess so, but we don't see a single wild horse on Summerset. We see plenty of Indrik, which are effectively kind of unicorn, I suppose. We see lots of crabs. We see Welwers, who were native to Summerset, and we see in Rothgar.
horses are able to be domesticated. I don't think Welwas could be domesticated. Are Welwas domesticated?
I honestly don't care.
Oh my god. Okay. Hey, if people want to have wolf mouths and other shit, sure, why not? Crab
I'm sure
mouth.
you could domesticate a crab, though. It's my answer is shallow, but ultimately I want the Altmer to be weirder.
Okay.
So we said it a few times in the Merithic Eye. I've gone out of my way to make Sarinteal's family, the Raleigh-Edril of Solstice. I've made them out to be... They're very weird. And I've done it in a way that I thought they'd be right at home on Summerset. You know, even on Summerset, they're considered quite odd. But they're the kind of weirdness that is par the course. They're, you know, this is a wizarding society. This, a wizarding culture. You know, everyone, not everyone, but you're going to get a great deal of eccentricity going on. And there isn't enough of that. But now I realise when the Raleigh-Edril go back to Summerset, they are going to look weird. They're going to look as weird there as they did to the rest of the world.
I have a feeling they won't mind.
No, but if I had the chance, I would write Summerset so that we could ride crabs, and they were all a little bit weirder, and there was a bit less politics. Not in the sense of politics within the Elder Scrolls, but modern day political sensibilities. I don't think. I mean, you asked me earlier why I like the Altmer, and I think it's because it's so divorced from everything we're used to in a lot of modern day writing, a lot of modern day media. There is a certain degree of progressive virtues being touted these days that the Altmer kind of just by nature of them being very traditional, very stuck in the mud, very unabashedly orthodox, they just sidestep it entirely. And I kind of feel like by injecting those progressive politics into their world, it's like water and oil.
Mm. Speaking of politics, there's a popular politician amongst the Nords that I heard was present on Summerset.
Oh yeah.
Rickard the Brash.
Yeah.
The man, the myth, the legend. Potential spoiler alert, but what role does he play, if any, on Summerset Isles? Is he a quest giver? Is he just there for flavor text? What does he do?
As I understand, he's a quest giver, and he writes a couple of books. Yeah, but like any good Altmer, I elect to ignore.
Okay.
So I'm afraid just I've not really, I saw him and I was like, oh, that's, it's nice to see him again, and then I just walked by him.
I can't help. This is conspiracy mind would work here, but I can't help but feel that this might be presaging some sort of attempt at a peace talk later down the line, because they're all like, okay, you know what, we better stop fighting because the world's going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, I mean, have we entered spoilers? I guess.
I don't give two shits about spoilers, so let's get into it.
Well, at the end of the Summerset main quest, you speak to an NPC on the side. I don't think they're a main one, and they say it might actually be Raz himself. And he says, "Oh, by the way, Irene has called the two other faction leaders to come to the defense of Summerset, and they've agreed."
Huh.
Yeah, and now they don't. You never see them. Obviously, you go to Crystal Tower and you stop whatever it is that needs to be stopped, and you sort it out before Emmerich sets his dirty greaves onto the deck of his ship. But they agree, they agree and come to the aid of Summerset, which is interesting. It is a world-ending incident, actually. It's in point of fact, we probably got closer to the end of the world the end of Nirn during the Summerset main quest than we did during the plane meld.
So you're telling me is that Iran does call for help because of this certain event, and you essentially go and stop that certain event and prevent the other, and therefore, the other two faction leaders don't really have a reason to come aboard now. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, it's egg on Iren's face because because she could have well been just lying through her teeth.
Jesus.
For all they know.
Wow. That's hats off to the story writers there. They that's a twist for sure. Because it could have been all predictable. It could have been all like, oh yeah, we gotta stop this. We gotta band together. But no. Okay, that's interesting. It's one of those times where your meddling, I don't know, could be to the detriment of Nirn, I suppose, if you were to look at it that way.
Not really, because you actually stopped the world from ending. So if we had stepped aside and let the factions deal with it, then there would be no world to speak of.
You don't think the faction leaders could have taken care of it?
No, because you stop it within moments of it coming to fruition.
Oh, you mean they wouldn't have been able to get there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, actually, They probably wouldn't have even been able to. They wouldn't have actually been able to do anything when they did arrive in Summerset, because you arrive at the Crystal Tower via very obscure magic.
Okay.
Which the other factions do not have access to.
Gotcha. And so they would not have been able to get inside the Crystal Tower.
Wow. Exactly. They would have nothing to do, so maybe they would have got to Summerset and just gone, hey, well, while we're here,
let's sack every town and city.
Yeah, let's beat the Numidium to the punch.
Yeah. I don't know if the other faction leaders would do that. It's interesting.
Well, it's Retin and it's a Nord, so need I say more?
It's interesting. You meet a faction leader on there. They're very sensible people. You get them all in a room, and they all devolve into politicians, childish politicians.
Can I just flag wave for a moment here? Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Iren. I think I think she has problems with her writing, to say the least. With her dialogue specifically, my character is loyal to her because, well, I wouldn't say he's loyal. He adheres to her rules because by the standards of the day, what she's done is very impressive. She's united 3 very strong races together to form arguably the strongest faction. Now, you can argue that, but you'd be wrong. Now, as somebody who is, I'm normally very critical of her, but in the incident where they go to, where the guilds organise for the 3 factions to get together and to discuss going into Cold Harbour to stop Molag Bal, Iren is the only one of the 3 leaders not to dismiss the whole thing from the offset. She actually tries to reason with the 2 of them. Emmerich and Joran just start spitting bile instantly, and she's at the side just like, guys, can we please just go to Molag Bal? So, hats off to her for doing that, at least.
I agree with that sentiment. I felt that in that instance, in that particular bit of story, if I were to rank people from most sensible to least sensible, I would probably be, in all honesty, I would probably put Iren at the top because her eye was on the ball, obviously. Jern at second, or I call him Yorun actually. Him second, and this is where I piss off the DC folks, I would probably put Emmerich at the bottom because Emmerich seemed already to have his guns out when he walked in.
Yes.
And he was immediately taking pot shots at the both of them, right? He calls
Irene a child.
and he calls Jorun a snow barbarian.
Oh no, he calls her an adolescent female and a snow barbarian for Jorun.
So that kind of just like adolescent female. It's like, what are you misogynistic or are you being ageist? What are you accomplishing with that insult?
Well, I mean, he is responsible for the death of many men and many women, so I'd probably say it's misanthropic rather than misogynistic.
Maybe, yeah, you're right there. But I do agree with you there. One of the things that does, if we're going to talk about Irene, I think one of the things about Irene as a character, I had trouble trying to flex my thinking into seeing how a character could follow her, given the fact that she had so many rivals for the throne, and even after taking the throne, there seems to be a large majority of the story seems to be dealing with that fallout. What are your thoughts on it?
It is interesting because today you'll see people, especially Aldmeri role players, get really quite upset about the idea of Irene. Like, genuinely upset. And while I say that she may not have the best written dialogue, and while, again, she is in part one of those examples of modern day sensibilities drifting into the Elder Scrolls, I do believe.
Careful! You don't want to piss off the social justice warriors.
No, I suppose I don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Dox me or what have you, and find out that I'm nobody. They touch upon a nerve, don't they, with some people? Actually, no, I don't. Is it understandable? I don't know. But sidestepping that, at the end of the day, there is. She's a warmonger. She genuinely, she is genuinely the head of what we would also consider an evil faction. She's racist by our standards, for starters. She doesn't want any of the lesser races on the throne, which...
It's interesting, because she called the Veiled Inheritance racist.
She did, yeah. Well, I mean, that's another example of her poorly chosen dialogue. But while her dialogue is trash, I shouldn't say that, should I? While it's god-awful, her story itself is I've reconciled very good. It's very effective, especially with Naaman, especially with where she ends up, because one of the last times you see Irene is alone in Marbrook, and she's got a throne. She's got a throne set in front of a hearth in quite a modest Aldmeri home, and she's stood in front of it facing the fire, and she's weeping, basically. She's crying into the fire, and she's surrounded by cats. And my God, if that doesn't just sum up where she's ended up as a result of her
thirst for power. Thirst for power.
Yeah, well, it's just, and it was really humanizing. I think it did much more to make me like the character than anything she said ever did.
Speaking of non-playable characters, then, such as who is your favorite character? For Khajiit, or for some Khajiit role players, it's Razumdar. For some Nord role players, it's Rigert the Brash. Or no, I'm just kidding. I don't know anybody that likes Rigert the Brash. Who do you think is a good Aldmeri character within the Elder Scrolls Online?
A good Aldmeri character? Jesus Christ, yeah. We're short of them because we've got the great mage Vanna Scalarian, who is just atrocious. He is an embarrassing character. We've got Tellinger, who's Tellinger the Artificer. He's fine. He's fine. Not as impressive as I'd like, and a little bit too outwardly arrogant in the same way Vanis is. But he's a bit better, but I don't like him. S3 is... What was that?
Mannimarco.
Oh, yeah, there's Mannimarco. Oh. No. No, not Mana Marco. I'm sorry. That archetype doesn't appeal to me very much.
Nah, I was just poking fun at Mana Marco.
Yeah, well, the fact that the end of his storyline in Oblivion is him like as Mr. Potato Head alone in his cave. It's difficult to admire him. I will say that. He starts off as the sexy guy at the top of White Gold Tower in his black armor and his anime features, and then he ends up as again an extra on Toy Story with his little kid's robe being killed by any randomer really, any randomer of the Mages Guild. So yeah, no, it's not Mana Marco. Estri is she's amusing, but she doesn't even know magic, so she can't count. I have a real soft spot for Naaman, Prince Naaman.
Okay.
He in any other period of Aldmeri history, he would have made a very competent king, but he is I don't know if he's whipped or if he's too loyal to Praxis, but he cedes the throne to his sister when she comes back from abroad. Now, I wouldn't say no to Irene because she's proven herself to be ruthless. She'll stand around and she'll call you a friend, but she effectively has her own secret police running around Summerset, killing borderline children. They are, violent children. They, you could say they deserve death, but the point is that she still has this secret police of cats and little people running around doing her dirty work for her. And I'm sure any monarch does. But Naaman had every right to deny her the throne, but he didn't. He didn't because I don't know why he didn't, to be honest. I think he's too loyal to the laws of his people, He trained for the allocated days to become king. He was excellent at, ceremoniarchy and all that jazz. He was lined up to be king, and he was lined up to be, a very good king that would have kept his people out of the war. His Summerset would be as it always had been before it, had he taken command. But because there are just there are stronger personalities. Well, no, that's a disservice to him. He has a strong personality, but again, it's just his loyalty means that he steps aside. Other people take the limelight, and he just ends up losing everything. We're misled to believe that he betrays Irene. But if you play through the Aldmeri Dominion storyline again, he's more of just a passive victim. His wife is scheming behind his back to take the throne from his sister, which he gave the throne to his sister, and while he may be a bit bitter about that, who wouldn't? And then he loses his wife, finds out she's a Daedric cultist, and he doesn't get so much as an apology for it from his sister. And while he's not necessarily owed one, she could do more. She could have done quite a bit more to support him. And then in the end, you see him at Elden Root, and he leaps into the orrery, to see if he would have made a great emperor. And he emerges from the other side. What does he emerge? Does he emerge as an ogre?
I think he turns into an orgrim or something like that.
Yeah. And I just love it. It's such a unfitting end for him from a sympathetic perspective, but it's such a perfect end for him in terms of the themes of his character. He's just such a loser. He's just such a loser, and I really like him for it.
Well, that goes to show you, not all losers are actual losers.
It plays into that idea that I mentioned earlier, that I just love things that are that have a facade of beauty on the top and refinement, and then underneath they're just kind of like an ogrim.
There's also, I think, doesn't he turn into a lich or something of that nature?
Yes, he's resurrected by his by his own personal adoring fan as a lich. He's given the staff of Magnus, and like against his will, he is made into an all-powerful lich that almost. What does he do? Does he almost? He almost turns green shade into the shadow wood, which is not a good. That's a big deal. Jesus Christ! Yeah, so I mean, he's a loser, but he almost ends the world in its own way.
I mean, that does again speak to his unspoken potential. If he was almost able to turn green shade into a shadow wood, that would have. That's impressive, to say the least.
Yeah.
Moving right along, then.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really laboured on that subject for a bit too long, but Naaman, I really have a soft spot for Naaman.
No, I'm glad we were able to talk about Naaman. I think that this is also a good segue into your character now, Sarinteal. Yeah. We talked about him before. We touched upon him a few times.
And I need to change my answer really, because obviously my favourite Altmer character is Sarinteal.
No, we're not counting roleplay characters.
I'll tell you something, Mikey. He is such a well-written character.
Okay. And I'll tell you something. The word egotistical is also on your keyboard. But no, I would agree with you that to stroke your ego, Sarinteal is a well-written character, and I was hoping we could get into some of his weirdness.
Okay, if you're prepared for long periods of silence while I try and remember what I've actually, decided is his background.
Okay, sure. I am very well prepared, actually.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So let's start on this path, because we touched upon it before. You said that the Reliadral family are a bit weird. In what ways are they weird? What aspects of their family did you purposely make them weird in?
I say everything that I deliberately made weird about them is just a byproduct of how weird the characters ended up by natural progression through roleplay. So, I mean, Sarinteal himself. No, let's start there. Oh my god, where do I start?
Let's start with Solstice. What is Solstice?
Solstice is an Acropolis built on an Acropolis built on an Acropolis. It's the result. If you imagine Sunhold, which I suppose you don't even know that well, it's basically Sunhold is an Aldmeri city on Summerset, and it's effectively a bulwark against the Malma. It's the closest major city to the Malma that the Altmer have, and it's consistently under attack by the Malma. Well,
right, it's also a public dungeon.
It is also a public dungeon. Yes, congratulations, all the Altmer characters who come from Sunhold. I'm sure you're just as pleased as all the ones that come from Dusk, which turned out to be a single tower. Jesus Christ. Right. Well, if you imagine Sunhold, Solstice is the northern equivalent of Sunhold. So it's not a major city. It's such a tiny, insignificant place in comparison to any of the major cities. But it is one of the closest geographical locations to the Sloan. So while the Altmer of Sunhold must deal with an Alma, the Altmer of Solstice, and before them, it was previously known as Sea Dirge, but now it's called Solstice because it's had a change of hands in the recent years, thanks to some Falmor meddling, shall we say. The previous kinship that owned Sea Dirge was effectively ousted, or rather they kind of may have accidentally gone extinct, and their stewards, or their seconds, the Reliadral, or the Releasee, as they're also known as, took stewardship. So Sarin is effectively the very first Kinlord of Solstice, and he may well be the last as well. You know, it's very difficult to talk about my own fanon backstory I've made for Sarinteal and the family without just going into so much irrelevant detail.
So he is the kin lord of Solstice, which is in the north. Now I'm looking at a map of Summerset here. I think it's from the Oblivion map. I see Sunhold's in the south, and you said Solstice is in the north. So would that be right on the tip there above Cloudrest, or
yes,
between Cloudrest
north of Cloudrest, as north as Cloudrest as you can get before it's just ocean, because it's
Gotcha.
like I said, it's an acropolis, so it's overlooking the ocean. It's a bulwark against the Slode, so the place has undergone quite a lot of hardship. Really, I'd say that the harder elves they're quite isolated in comparison to their peers, because the area is just rocky and it's not conducive to luxurious Aldmeri living. But it had to be defended, otherwise the Slode would roll up onto the shore and they'd do whatever it is they do.
Slowed Normandy.
Yes, yeah, a very slowed Normandy, because they just kind of ooze.
How long have the Releasee or the Reliedril been at Solstice?
Not very long, since Solstice itself isn't, well, Solstice in its current state isn't that old. Like I said, it's how long have they been there? Since the late Merithic era, effectively. Now, some of them have been there before it, but the Releasee, as we know them, as their history began, was in the late Merithic era, and it was, and they were serving the Velcanos of Sea Dirge. And over time, as more Slodes have kind of like rolled up onto the shore and worn away at their lands, Sea Dirge was washed away. It kind of started to just crumble through, basic abrasion, erosion, stuff like that, or slowed. What they call slowed bloat mages or something. Basically, suicide bombers in mage slug form. They fill themselves full of alchemical mixtures, and then they fling themselves at cities, and they basically explode all over the place.
Wow. Well, they're necromancers. They can always be resurrected anyway. Just need to gather up all the pieces.
Put them back together is all. I mean, the Velcano kinship is just another of my. It's another of my creations, and they aren't really all that noteworthy. They were just fine defenders of Summerset. They were stalwart. They protected their lands. They were your quintessential golden Altmer. Everybody. Well, I wouldn't say everybody likes them. Not many people really knew them. They just kind of did the job. Now, the Releasee were their black sheep stewards. So they looked after the management of Sea Dirge and its trade, its people. They were the Cannon Reeves, who are second to the Kin Lords, and they were a little bit, hand-rubby, conniving, political. They just got shit done. They weren't dangerous or anything like that. But by nature of being so isolationist, and by nature of their, you could call it impure bloodline, they kind of took on a bit more of a. They didn't adhere as closely to the Eight as the rest of the Altmer do. They had a bit more directly ancestor worship. They were more inclined towards the old ways that we see with the Sigics. So there's a lot of talismans. There's a lot of dancing around fires, stuff like that. But in a very refined Altmeri way. They praise the Magna Gi and the Et Arda, and just generally didn't adhere to the authority of the gods. They just respected their ancestors and where they came from.
Okay, and this is the Reliedril.
This is the Reliedril, yes. The Volcanos were just a bit more kind of, straight and narrow.
So perhaps this is the first instance of we see them a bit more different than the rest of their Altmer counterparts in the fact that their worship.
Yes, I suppose so. Yeah. In every other way, they were very similar, but they just liked to keep to the old ways. But there's always going to be two sides to the matter. So while I can say, hey, they worshipped their ancestors, they didn't mind so much about the eight. That only accounts for the more notable members of the family. For the most part, the Relacy, the Raleigh-Edril were just like your average family for however many hundreds, thousands of years. They aren't. For the most part, they're barely even a footnote in history. They're just a bit odd.
Okay. So moving on from the beginning there, then down to Sarinteal's time, how does he find himself at the center of all this?
So you have to excuse me because I'm not good with dates and stuff like that. I have worked it out before, and I put it all down, and I was confident that it was correct, and I just left it, and I forgot all the dates, all the numbers, all the years, and stuff like that. But I do have the story down in my head. And Sarinteal started off as a muse. In the kind of traditional sense, he was very gregarious, very sociable, very magnetic as an individual. He was very eager to learn, and he had a bit of a wanderlust, which was inspired by his father, because his father, Daedalian, I wouldn't say he travelled the world, but he travelled more than most Altmer do, because he facilitated the trade that kept Solstice / Sea Dirge afloat. You can't do much without gold. And since they were a seaside town, it was the most rational means of making money. So Sarinteal got around quite a bit, and whenever he would return to port in Summerset, he'd still want to go places. He'd always be on the move when he's out and about on ships. So when he's back and stuck in this isolated place, he gets restless. So he went out and he made waves, really, and you could almost call him a young Dorian Gray, almost. He was a muse who kind of just laid around, and people lavished over him because he was attractive. He was young, probably too young by our standards. He was very receptive. He was just so eager to learn about things that were Altmer, because he spent so much time on a ship or talking to these disgusting things called humans on the Gold Coast. And by extension, as he started to grow older, he became better at being a muse. He started to attend social occasions. He started to learn how to play the game as we know it. And this led him to his first wife, Sonder, who was a Velcano herself, but she was a magister. Yeah, she was a magister of the Crystal Tower. So while she was a Velcano, she wasn't. He didn't grow up around her really so much, and she was centuries his elder. And she took him under her wing when he started to attend the various colleges around Summerset. I imagine he got refused from quite a few because he was just a little bit too. You imagine a studious Aldmeri mind, and they're not the most sociable. They're not the most energetic people. Whereas Sarinteal, you can imagine he was. If somebody dotes on you, if various people dote upon you and make art and write songs about you from a very early age, you will develop something close to an ego, shall we say. And he did. And his ego garnered him more attention, both negative and positive. and before too long he was, barred from various colleges, but still managed to find his way temporarily to the Crystal Tower, where again, in time, he would be sent home just because he was too in your face and too challenging to a lot of people. But while he was there, he made more than enough friends in the Magisters and in the assistant Sapiarchs to continue to learn while away from the tower itself. And I will say that while he was there, he was a student of Nolan the Many-Hued, who was a Sapiarch of enchantment. So he's always had this thing for minerals and more mystical magic, as his mother herself was a mystic. I'm just going to take a breather while I just regather myself.
I did want to ask about him, how being, I guess, rejected from the various colleges played into his psyche. Did it make him, I guess, more eccentric, or did it, kind of humble him a little bit? You know what I mean?
It didn't humble him. Nothing will humble Sarinteal.
Okay.
At this, well, actually, no, a few things will. Yeah, what's the point of playing a character if you can't humble them from time to time? But by and large, it didn't slow him down, shall we say. If anything, it sped him up, and it's reinforced his political views, really. Or rather, it served as the impetus for his political views that would be stoked by, first, his mother, who is Maruan, the Caller, who's probably the most powerful influence over his early life, second only to his wife. His father, he takes after a great deal, but he didn't like, and he doesn't consider himself influenced by his father at all. I should rewind a bit and just say that, Daedalian was an elf with many wives, many children from those wives. So Sarinteal had many siblings, really. That's why he kind of sought his attentions from elsewhere, because he was just, one of many. While a lot of those children didn't really live to see a birthday, it did leave him with, he had two other brothers. He had Ariamis, a name that you might recognize, but you might not actually, and he had, what was his name? Menelendor.
Nope, never heard of him.
No, well, he's, you're not meant to, really. He's part of a few stories I've written, but I've never really published them because I'm still trying to refine what he is, and the stories themselves peter off a bit. I mean, they're nice, but they peter off. But in my mind, he's called the Lavender Lord, and he didn't quite get in. He didn't quite. He's almost like Naaman in that, he's a very, I suppose you could call him wholesome, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have the drive to make him an important player. Anyway, so there was Sarinteal, who's you could call him the middle child. There's Ariamis, the eldest.
Vagabond.
Yes, well, he is now. At the time, he was the star child, you could say. He was, the apple of his mother's eye. He was the most athletically competent. He was the most. He was the tallest, the most muscular. He had the most symmetrical face.
Why can't you be more like your older brother?
Exactly, but as with all of Sarinteal's family, some obscure or very specific ill fate befalls them, and they disperse. I wouldn't say they don't all die. Maruan perished. Daedalian is ousted. He's exiled. Menelendor is somewhere in between exiled and not exiled, and Ariamis vanishes.
Is this fate ever? Have you ever ironed this fate out, or is is something that you prefer to keep private?
Well, Maruan, his mother, the Thracian plague took her, but she ended up sacrificing herself, in fact. So I don't know if you read Principality of Solstice.
Nope.
No.
I knew
well,
that the Thracian plague is just it's called slug famine or something like that. It's something to do with the slugs, I think.
Well, actually, in Summerset, they specifically there's an abandoned town or village that was just wiped off the map by the Thracian plague, and you enter it, and it tells you exactly what the plague was, which I don't think we've actually been told until now. And what it does is that it makes people thirsty, just really, really thirsty, and they thirst forever, really, until I don't know exactly what kills them in the end. Presumably, they either explode or they just never have their thirst quenched.
They could die of overhydration. That is a thing.
Yeah, well, that could well be it, to be honest.
It could be one of those things where their stomach simply bursts from all the water consumption too. I know that's a form of torture that was used in the Korean War, where they made the folks just drink massive amounts of water, like force feeding them water until their stomach bursts. So kind of imagine that could be something along that lines. I don't know. That is interesting. Those poor folks.
Yeah. Well, it took Maruan, but not before she sacrificed herself for the betterment of Solstice. Because one of the things Solstice always, I'm just going to refer to it as Solstice because if I say like Solstice, otherwise known as Sea Dirge, otherwise known as, it's just going to get even longer than it already is. One thing Solstice always lacked was a consistent source of spring water. Clear water. Nothing really ever grew there. They didn't really have any, like I said, any water to drink from. And Maruan's sacrifice, I won't go into the details of it, but Maruan's sacrifice changed that. And it's part of the reason why Sarinteal holds her in such high regard, really. It's pretty much the reason why Solstice was able to stop surviving and start thriving. Ariamis himself, it was self-exile that took him away. He either suffered something or did something to make him leave Summerset without word. So I roleplay him now. Well, he's currently a vagabond, as it says in his description. But his story is still very much going. As for Menelendor, he was just too gentle. He just got pushed around, basically. He's almost like the normal one of the family. He just went off and did his thing. He got a profession. And Daedalian, he was exiled by Sarinteal for being a threat to Sarinteal's leadership. The man himself is incredibly old, incredibly domineering. He's basically Brian Blessed in Altmer form, if you can imagine such a thing. And Sarin just packed Daedalian up on a ship with his many wives and pushed him out to sea.
Well, at least he has some amount of happiness, I suppose. Though I do.
Oh yeah, well he's effectively a trade prince now. I wouldn't say it's left up in the air exactly what he's up to, but he's not suffering. I'll say that.
I do appreciate the nod to Brian Blessed. For any Roman history fan that might know, he's the actor that was in the TV series I, Claudius, if I remember correctly. And the man played Augustus, which was funny because I believe he's known for like his booming voice. Like he's got such a great howl, I suppose, and a good laugh. The reason I know about him is because he did a featurette for the developers blog for Rome Total War or Total War Rome 2. But that's not.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did. They did a feature. They had him in the featurette, and they were talking about how ballistas work, and the rest of another Roman ballistics, which was pretty cool. But that's neither here nor there. You spoke about Sarinteal's leadership, so let's segue that towards the Merithic Eye. Would it be fair to say that he calls the shots for those folks?
Yes, he gives a long leash to people, though. He really encourages independent thought to an extent. Obviously, the Merithic Eye's Thalmor, and the Thalmor value uniformity really almost above all else. So long as they follow Thalmor precepts, or appear to be following Thalmor precepts, or support the Thalmor agenda, or even his agenda, then it's we're golden.
Literally. But okay, let's talk about that. How does Sarinteal end up getting the reins on a Thalmor sect organization? I think that's the words you use. It's a Thalmor, Thalmor sect.
Yeah, it's it's either like a political sect, but more recently we lean it more towards it's an office of the Thalmor. And that's another instance where Summerset's kind of vindicated me, because you're probably aware of the Divine Prosecution now because of their motif, and it's been advertised so much.
Yep. They sell like hotcakes.
Yes. Well, the Office of the Divine Prosecution is a Thalmor-backed law enforcement initiative on Summerset. And, I put emphasis on it's the Thalmor Office of Divine Prosecution. So the fact that we call ourselves the Merithic Eye, it's either the Thalmor Office of the Merithic Eye or the Thalmor Office of Tamriel Heritage Conservation and Cultural Reformation. It's like I said, we are the Divine Prosecution in a sense, but we're more focused on the heritage of the Aldmeri, of like delving into ruins, collecting artifacts, preserving those artifacts, and preserving everything that they represent, because Sarinteal believes that the best way for the Aldmeri for the Thalmor, the Aldmeri, for Queen Irene to rule Cyrodiil, but Tamriel is to not necessarily repeat the past, but to see what held it together during the Merithic era.
Okay. And they're headquartered in the Beacon Fall estate.
They are, yes, or they were. I'd say that their primary HQ for the most part was Beacon Fall Manor, or Beacon Fall Estate, as you say. This year they moved to the Gold Coast to basically expand they want to annex the Gold Coast, effectively, because Fortuna Abdougal, was that right? Is that her name?
The Pirate Queen?
Yes, the Pirate Queen.
Yes.
She's dead. And it leaves Anvil in a kind of purgatory, I suppose. Count Carolus, I think that's his name, is no doubt going to take over it. But the Aldmeri, or the Thalmor, or the Merithic Eye want to kind of like see if they can put their foot in the door and squeeze in and kind of annex that particular little city for themselves. So they're currently stationed at the Summertree Embassy in the Gold Coast.
Okay. Now, the Summertree Embassy, is that like an actual place in the Gold Coast, or is that some like a house of some sort that you guys?
It's not in law or anything like that. It was it's that Nibonese manor that you get the homestead.
Oh, Lynch Algren Manor.
Yeah, that's the one.
Gotcha. Now, this might be something that might turn some heads when they think about like, wait, they're trying to get in the foot in the door to do what now? So how do you guys play that to avoid, I guess, friction with the folks that are in or that have been RPing in the Gold Coast?
Friction is expected.
Okay.
On an in-character basis. We've always advertised ourselves as a soft antagonistic guild. So we represent a threat to everybody except the Aldmeri. Well, everybody except traditional Aldmeri, I suppose. But we are not ourselves the force that is going to burn their houses down. Well, we might be, but we're representatives. We're not the army itself. So we're there on the fact that we call it an embassy is because we're on an ambassadorial mission. And the way we kind of avoid it is we don't put it upon anybody. We don't really come into this whole. We don't go to the Gold Coast with expectations of success. In character, we do. Out of character, it's a doomed endeavor, obviously. But it makes the most sense. I don't see why it's not that. There is already a Dominion presence in the Gold Coast. Velen Harbour is just across the way, which is a Dominion-owned harbour in Malabal Tor. Razandar is in the Gold Coast. There is already an influence there, and we are just representing another part of it.
And what drove this move from Eleanor to Gold Coast? Was it just like a need for a change of scenery, or how did you guys come to that decision?
I wouldn't say it was a need. It was more the opportunity was there.
Okay. And how has this change of scenery been played out for some of the Aldmeri in the guild? I know it's hard to characterize every single member, but my question is more along the general lines, like have they taken to it positively, negatively? What has the experience been like for them? Let's go with that.
Well, so long as none of the natives come to say hello, they're pretty much, you could almost say they've terraformed Linchel Manor. Is it Linchel or Litchel?
Linchel, I believe there's an N in there somewhere.
They've almost terraformed it to look like Summerset anyway, so they're living in their own little delusion anyway. They have pretty easy access back to Aridon, relatively easy access back to Aridon, so should they grow homesick, it isn't really that much of a trial for them to go home. That said, as soon as the locals, the proud Colovian locals, come to visit, things get tense. You've got Aldmeri who are very much, they don't lie. They say, we are here to provide. Well, actually, they do lie. They use bureaucratic speech. We're here to provide an administrative service to the local community. That's the way they'd probably put it, or it's the way Sarinteal would put it while he's steepling his fingers. What it has, to answer your question, what it has showcased within, especially our leadership, is how it shows a difference between our political characters and our military characters and our magey characters. So, like I said, Sarinteal will steeple his fingers, and he will be far more sly about it. He'll put it into words that at first appear palatable. For a Colovian, they don't really go in for it. Obviously, they're straight talkers. So next on the line is the military. So we've got our own Field Reeve. He's definitely the quintessential Aldmeri commander type. And he will lay it out straight. He will make it clear that we are here as an occupying force, and if you raise a hand to us, we will take that hand off. And then you've got your magey characters who are like, "Ooh, I'm here to see the Ayleid ruins. I want to see all these repositories of ancient elven lore and knowledge among these lands where your people wiped out.
They said with a smile that reached up to their eyes. Those meaty characters you got to be careful of. Never mind the bureaucrats or the military folk.
Really, it's sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just kind of wanted to be a little bit more precise with Sarinteal. He's always admired the aliens more than he probably should. So, harkening back to when you asked me why the Rally Edril are considered slightly odd among the Altmer, it's and why Sarinteal rubbed people the wrong way, and it's because he delved a lot into Merithic and Mirrolithic cultures around the time of the Merithic era. So he wanted to see the elves at the apex of their strength, I suppose, in recent memory, when they effectively ruled Tamriel. And out of the various kingdoms, he views the Ayleids as the most similar to the Altmer. He doesn't actually see them as a different race. He prescribes to the idea that they are known as the Heartland High Elves. They are just High Elves of Cyrodiil. And when they were killed, when they were wiped out through one means or another, that was a blow against the Altmer people, and they just stood by and they just watched it. And now is the time of the Dominion. The elves are going to come. Sarinteal is going to see if there's any Ayleid settlements left, and if there are people left there, he will let them know that the elves have come to reclaim their rightful land. If he doesn't find any people there, he will find what they left behind and he will put it to use in this new Merithic era. Now, considering these elves that he admires, one of them is called Hadhul, the Fire King. And what he is known for, aside from never being defeated in single combat until Pelennor, is he is known for setting fire to human children and sending them off into the night and chasing them down with tigers for sport.
Not to mention, most of the aliens were Daedra-worshipping folks and slavers.
Well, that's actually a misnomer that Sarinteal is trying to reverse.
A quote-unquote misnomer. No, they didn't mean that. No. Scrub out the D there. They were never like that.
Well, part of the reason why the Alessians saw such success, I mean, obviously it was divine mandated to an extent by almost by a great deal of gods, presumably. The reason they saw such success, and probably the reason why they had such initial success, is because the Ayleids were enjoying a civil war between the Daedra worshippers and the Aedra worshippers. So the Ayleids were in a process of purging the Daedra from their system.
I did not know this, that they were in the state of civil war, but that does make sense, because a lot of times when you look at an empire, let's say, I guess the Roman Empire for one of them, a lot of them tend to rot from the inside out before they fall to some external force, which is interesting.
Well, I mean, it stands to reason that a civil war means that the Ayleid are going to be far more lax with their slaves than they normally were. And this is going to give the slaves a chance to revolt, which they did.
I can't argue with that there. I mean, there's also the famous example of Spartacus, who led a revolt when the slavery laws got a little bit lax, which was interesting. So, moving on then, Sarinteal is now in the Gold Coast, along with the rest of the Merithic Eye. Is his family also in the Gold Coast as well?
No, Solstice is almost constantly under attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, or it's suffering some kind of ailment. So almost always his daughter is managing it, and his wife is currently looking after it, and his two sons, Velasimir and Morwinian, they kind of go back and forth. Sometimes Sarinteal himself goes there, so they kind of spread out across the place, and Sarinteal makes a point of handing out quests to his family members. He doesn't believe that the Aldmeri should be idle. It's, like I said, when he was younger, he really butted heads with quite a few of the Aldmeri figureheads. He made friends with other ones, of course, but it is because of this driving force he has to reclaim the past, and he doesn't believe that sitting on your laurels is the way to go. So that's his quest, is to recapture the past, which is a doomed quest at that. But that's why he's always working.
So then let's talk about Varlasemir's quest, because you did touch upon him just a little bit. Let's start with this question. What's the relationship like between father and son, between Sarinteal and Varlasemir?
Sarinteal isn't as close with Velasimir as his wife is. And the reason for that is Velasimir is effectively a byproduct of Sarinteal's capacity to recreate what has been. Now, Sarinteal's first son, Vastalon, was very much like Daedalus in that he was a burly warrior. He was as far as an Aldmeri can be burly, but he was your quintessential less knightly, more warrior inspired individual, and in turn he inspired a lot of respect and admiration from the kinhold of Solstice, more so towards the end of his life than Sarinteal himself did. Sarinteal is very I'd like to think very charismatic when he wants to be. I mean, obviously that varies as a result of roleplay. You can't be charismatic all the time, and I think it would be wrong for me to say that he is by definition a likable individual, because he isn't. But Vastalon was somewhere else. He was an archetype, I suppose you could just call him. He was effectively Rhaegar. You know, he was Mr. Perfect. And over time, Sarinteal grew, I don't know if you could say jealous of this, but he began to dislike the threat that it posed, or rather the challenge that it posed, because Vastalon, as he started to grow, he would make decisions of his own without consulting Sarinteal. And more often than not, it would end well. It would end better than probably what Sarinteal would suggest, because he preempted everything. And in the end, Sarinteal lost his patience with his son, and he didn't banish him. He
killed him. That bloodthirsty motherfucker. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, fuck no! Sarin wouldn't kill any of his family. That's one of his principles, you could say. He doesn't kill. Well, he tries not to. He'll kill only when required.
He'll kill humans.
But yes, he would commit genocide on the humans if he was given half the if he was given the chance. But he rarely does things with his own hands. When he does, it's an extreme situation. I could probably count on one hand the NPCs, and yet the NPCs Sarinteal has killed in my time with role-playing him, because he's always done it through other people. But to get back to the point, he sent Vastalon to the Aloda Advance, which is Solstice's offshore trading post. It's if you think to I've forgotten the name of it, but the Japanese back in the day, when they were just so opening their borders to Portuguese and the Japanese, they created an artificial island for for the purpose of foreigners to live upon. So they were technically not on or in Japan, but they were they were on hand, and they were there for trading, and they were there to maintain relations, and that's what the Aluada event is. It was also, an advanced warning to Solstice that the Slowed are coming, because it's just an offshore island. So Sarinteal sent him there under the pretense that you're our shield, Vastalon. You will protect us. Now, I won't get into the story of what Sarinteal was doing to Vastalon's wife-to-be at the time, but that'll come later. Vastalon was sent to the Aluada Advance. Now, this was just in time for a surprise attack by the Mauma. So the Aldmeri Solstice are not always prepared for the Mauma, because they come around the other side of the island. They're warded against the Slowed, and they're prepared for the slow moving, or they're prepared for the signs that the Slowed will give off when they're imminent to attack. The Mauma, it was just a surprise attack. It was a raid upon Aluada, and Vastalon died defending his people. Now, this wasn't intended by Sarin, but it's what happened.
Does he feel responsible for that?
Does he feel responsible for that? That's a good question. I mean, Sarinteal's perfect, so how could he make a mistake like that?
Okay.
No, it was the first time in Sarinteal's life where his actions and his selfishness really came back to bite him in the arse. Because I wrote a story called Sun's Height, and it's my longest story, or longest single post story, I should say. And it shows, and it's Vastalon's funeral procession, and he's burned on a pyre, and basically it just goes into detail of how Sarinteal had to discuss with his alchemists how to make it look like when they burned Vastalon's body that his soul was going to Aetherius, because they had to orchestrate that, because it wasn't going to Aetherius, because a Mauma necromancer had stolen it when he killed him. So to protect his own image, to protect the memory of Vastalon, to kind of diminish the tragedy of it all, everybody got to see his soul ascend to Aetherius. But it didn't stop after the pyre had burnt out. It didn't stop Sarinteal's wife when they retreated to the Acropolis itself, to their bedroom in the highest peak. It didn't stop Sonder from throwing herself out the window into the rocks below. So she committed suicide, and it's where Sarinteal has only one notable scar, and it's the claw mark across his face, and that was received when he went onto the balcony with his wife, and she threw herself off. And what she had always done to try and soothe him was what any wife would probably do to an extent. She placed a hand on his cheek, to what he thought was to ease his sorrows, and what she meant as a goodbye. And then she stepped off the side of the balcony. He gripped her wrist to try and stop her, and she dug her fingers into his cheek, and it raked down his face so deep that it's caused lifelong scars before she fell to her death. And that was basically the incident where Sarinteal realized that there are consequences to selfish action. And this is a long-winded way of me getting back to Vlaisamir, who is basically Vastalon reincarnated, or an attempt to recreate Vastalon. There's been a lot of there's a lot of expectation piled upon Velasimir, and there's a lot of expectation that he will end up as, Vastalon number 2, but he's not as tall as Vastalon was. He's not as muscular as Vastalon was. He's not as attractive as Vastalon was. He's not as friendly. He's not as sociable. He's not as anything. He's not as much as Vastalon was. And whereas,
so that means that he is his own dude. He doesn't exactly have Vastalon's soul.
No.
Okay.
He's
that's
not.
That's what I first thought of when you said that
He's a symbolic reincarnation.
Gotcha.
Well, he's almost like the ghost of Vastalon come back to haunt Sarinteal. But whereas Vastalon was gold, Velasimir is silver. That kind of idea in terms of medals. And this weighs down just so heavily on Velasimir that he's a very angry or pent-up individual. I won't say he's angry because he doesn't come across as angry, but he's very he's
holding it all in.
He's holding it all in. He's very suppressed in every sense of the word. He is very suppressed, and I get to with Velasimir, I get to go from Sarinteal, who's very suave, who looks like he's trying to seduce the air at all times. He's living in rapture of himself. And you go from him to Velasimir, who is almost the complete opposite. He's almost ashamed to be wearing his own skin, although he rarely shows it really in an abject way. Whereas Sarinteal's morality is questionable. He will shift and shape depending on the situation. Velasimir is very, very stern, very rigid. It's you're either right or you're wrong. There is no middle ground. He believes in honor. He believes in the classical notions of chivalry. He believes in ceremony and tradition, and he is on the surface he is your textbook perfect little Aldmeri boy, but you will, as soon as he starts to open his mouth, the cracks begin to show.
There's an interesting picture that you have of Velasimir. It's on his character profile, where it's him wielding a sword and what looks to be his father and mother looking on in the background. Now, it speaks volumes to me, especially with what you're telling me, because they have these expectations placed upon his shoulders, is to try and make him the golden boy that once was, but turns out he's silver. How long do you think it'll be before he cracks?
Well, the interesting thing about Velasimir is there's this air of doom about the Raliadril. They've all got a ticking clock next to their name. And sooner or later it's gonna, time's gonna be up. And it'll be time for one of them, two of them, three of them, all of them to die. And what people expect Morwinian, who is very much your typical Loki archetype. You look at the Marvel franchise, or you look at Thor, and you look at Loki, and you go, that guy is going to kill his dad. He's you can't trust him. Well, the irony is that Sarinteal and Morwinian, as much as they do not get along, and as much as Sarinteal and Velasimir do get along in a cordial respect, Velasimir is the one that's likely to betray everything that his father stands for, and he's potentially going to be the one who drives his sword into his father's back.
It's poetic. I like it.
Yeah, well, I try. I do my best.
It's not good enough. No,
no, it never is. It never is. It's one of many outcomes, but it's the one that seems the most inevitable.
What is it about Sarinteal that you enjoy role-playing the most?
It's the themes. It's the motifs that are constantly running through him. Sarinteal is a reincarnation of a reincarnation of a reincarnation of my first character. You know, he's a tradition in himself, and he's a constantly evolving character. So when I made Sarinteal, I had my main character that I had roleplayed for a great deal of time. He was called Sarinteal. He was a blood elf in World of Warcraft, and his story ended pretty much. He got run over by a Kodo, and he broke almost every bone in his body. And I was like, well, there we go. And when I came to want to make a new character, I had... Sarinteal was a very stern, stoic, angry... Well, not angry. He was a military man, very serious. And I wanted to roleplay something completely different. But I enjoyed the themes of Sarinteal. So what I did was I went back in his storyline, and I looked at every key moment in his life and every decision that he made, and I flipped it. So Sarinteal is the inside-out version of Sarinteal. In World of Warcraft, I don't know if you're aware, but I'll just kind of... I won't go into too much detail, but I'll just explain the basic principle of it. There's something called the mana bomb, which the Blood Elves produced, which is your WMD. It's just a weapon of mass destruction. It destroys cities at a time. And Sarinteal helped to build it. He may have only had a small hand in it, but he had this... But he built it, he saw it go off, and he had the same remorse for what he had done as the folks who made the atomic bomb did. He hated it. He wanted to distance himself from it, and it wrecked his loyalties at the time. Now, Sarinteal, if he set off that mana bomb, he would marvel at how efficient it was. He was just like, wow, that has saved so much time. Killing all those people has saved us time, money, our own soldiers. It's saved us, it can be used to application in the future. It can end all wars. We can go back to our lives now. So, while he's not the evil version of Sarinteal, I won't even say efficient. He's just, it's a different perspective. It's a flipped perspective.
Okay, now let's reflect that question towards Barlasamir. What is it about that fellow that you like to RP?
That he's so different from Sarinteal. I mean, he's not a flipped perspective the way Sarinteal is. He's he's something that I've never really tried before. Until Barlasamir, or rather, when I made Sarinteal for the first time, not so much anymore, but it was with I was quite a lot younger then, and I had the kind of typical teenager's disdain for tradition, really. Sarinteal was originally there to kind of challenge the principles of his people. Now, these days, I've grown up. I see the merit of tradition, of traditional modes of thinking, and how they instill within us a sense of community and consistency and support. And it also, again, I've worked in cultural heritage, and it's wonderful to go back in time and see how far your people have come, or how all of our people have come in various ways, while not losing touch of where you came from. Now, Barlasamir is the extreme of that. He is just so rigidly stapled to the side of everything the Aldmeri stand for. But the fact that he is the son of Sarinteal, who is such an individual among the Aldmeri, and to an extent almost antithesis on a metaphysical level to the Altmer. He has a lot of pent up disdain for. I mean, he loves his family more than anything, but he struggles to reconcile what his family is.
So you mentioned Morwinian before. Now, I'm not sure if this is a character you actually RP or this is a character that someone else RPs, but I was able to gather that from the way you were talking that they seem to be another son of Sarin. So what's the deal there?
So Morwinian is Ferveren's character. The question is he Sarinteal's son is an interesting one.
Well, what is he to Sarinteal?
He is Caitlin Sarinteal's wife's son.
So a stepson, perhaps?
Kind of, yeah. I suppose, yeah. In absolute definition, he is Sarinteal's stepson. He advertises Morwinian as his son, though. He doesn't accept the idea that what's the way? He doesn't like the idea of people thinking that Caitlin has had a son with another elf. You know, there's a certain like prideful stigma attached to it on his part. So Morwinian is Caitlin's son to another elf who was conceived while she was, should we say, estranged from Sarinteal. It's kind of left. This is where we play a similar game to Elder Scrolls itself, because we turn it into it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this. So it could be A, Morwinian is Caitlin and this other elf's son. It could be B, it's Sarinteal and Caitlin's son. Or, oh bollocks, no, I balls it up, sorry. Ballsed it up.
But looking at, I was able to find the character profile here, and looking at it, the emancipation of duality, those are the first three words that I see. And it does make me wonder what that means exactly. And at the same time, I do get some Loki vibes, mostly probably because of the green eyes that they got going there, and the little sketch of him being as a kid at the bottom, which is interesting. And it harkens back to how you were talking about you think it might be Morwinian that you might betray him, but when in actuality it could be most likely Varlasimir.
Yeah, in your traditional story, Morwinian would be the traitor. But in actuality, he's probably the one that will stay loyal the longest. Yeah, as for the Loki thing, it is interesting looking back. I mean, when he was first conceived, it wasn't, as far as I'm aware, it wasn't an intention for it. Morwinian's seen many, Morwinian's seen many different interpretations over multiple games. He's more of an abstract concept at this point, but the strongest version of Morwinian is definitely his Altmer one, which is the same for almost all of our characters, to be honest, because well, maybe it's because we put the most effort into the Elder Scrolls Online, but I prefer to also think that the world is so enriching that just by having your character in it and trying to find their roots and where they fit into it all, the natural byproduct is that they are just a better character for it, because there's so many different variables that they just become a living, breathing character in their own right. Like the reins are kind of taken away from you, and you are given by Nern, by Tamriel, almost like set guidelines.
I agree with that sentiment to a certain extent. I think that this is generally applicable to any universe that has a very in-depth set of rules. I would say that Star Wars: The Old Republic is another universe that has layers upon layers of lore and various things that interplay that allow for characters of such nature.
Unfortunately, yeah, Star Wars: The Old Republic is just one that's bypassed me completely. I mean, I own the game. I got it not long, well, maybe a year after it came out, but I subscribed for a month and I was done. I didn't even get halfway through it. It's unfortunate because I would have really liked to roleplay there and like learn a bit more about it.
Well, I think the world is great. The MMO has been suffering as of recent. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, I don't think you'd see it in like other roleplay games such as like Guild Wars 2, or I don't think WildStar either. But then again, I don't know much about WildStar. Secret World is a little generic for taste anyway.
Well, it's funny that you should mention Guild Wars 2 because that's where Morwinian originates from, and I've seen Morwinian in action in Guild Wars 2, and he's nowhere near as living and breathing as he is in The Elder Scrolls Online. I think Varen has constructed a very complicated individual, and like Sarinteal, he's magnetic in a way that Sarinteal used to be. These days, Sarinteal is more. He's not necessarily aloof, but his conniving ways to put a distance between himself and other people, whereas Morwinian is definitely all about getting up in their faces, for better or worse. Would you ever roleplay an Altmer? Have I convinced you, by any stretch of the imagination, that role-playing an Altmer is a good idea? I don't think I've done a very good job, I'll be honest, because I haven't actually explained why they are so intriguing, but it's more something that I like to think people figure out of their own accord.
I think I've already asked you what it is about Aldmeri that make them intriguing to you. What is it about Aldmeri that makes them intriguing to the normal person like me, a pleb?
They have the best motifs probably. They're going to have the best houses. Yeah. They have the best region. You know, they have the most complete nation to speak of. Their lore has expanded drastically, and like
the most complete nation.
Yeah, well, as in like we've got all of Summerset now.
Ah, right. Okay, that's what you mean. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, sure. A complete kingdom, I should say. But we've got all of Morrowind except for the southwest and whatnot. But really, it's again, it's a been there, done that kind of thing. This is the first time we've seen the Altmer in full swing, and it's fresh content. It's it's ripe grounds, I suppose. It's one way to fertile territory. Should we go for that one?
Sure. And it's something that'll be a fad for a little bit. I do think.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm just using history as an example.
Fair enough.
But okay, if I do think that nevertheless, the Altmer community will expand. I think that's bound to happen because you're always going to get those folks who are like you and we're like, hey, you know what? This is actually pretty cool. I'm going to stick with this for.
Yeah, that is true. It's already begun to happen anyway because, like I said, the Discord has expanded quite drastically. It's just like you said, it's a matter of retention, long-term retention.
In terms of convincing me, this is more probably for a personal flaw, but I've never felt home RPing, or I never felt at home RPing in a fantasy genre. I've always been of the more of the sci-fi, no, I guess space fantasy, more sci-fi urban sort of deal. And so fantasy in and of itself has always been a tough one for me, particularly because of, the elves are, as you said, other.
Yeah, I get that. We all have
I,
our preferences.
I would try it, sure, just to see what I could do with it. The idea of, I guess, if I were to think about it and come up with a character concept off the top of my head, I'd probably go ahead and do something that's probably something similar to the Price of Praxis, but in that you'd have this guy who has had his I apologize, what was the talisman called again?
The Praxis Talisman.
Right, the Praxis talisman, excuse me. Who'd had his Praxis talisman, shattered for one reason or another and was therefore disgraced. And from there it would be a story of redemption, I would suppose, would make it a more quintessential search for identity and perfection as any other. At least that's what I would start as a character concept anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I mean, what it would do is it would divorce you from the Altmer community on quite a drastic scale, but it would allow you to leave Summerset, for instance, if he wanted to redeem himself by going abroad and fulfilling great deeds. That's a good motivator.
Is that grounds for exile if you break your Praxis talisman?
No, it's social. You're a social pariah, though. People will actively avoid talking to you.
Ah.
If you lose your praxic talisman, you're rendered apraxic, as in apraxic, as in amoral, and you're rendered what is the equivalent of an untouchable. Even speaking to you is grounds for suspicion.
I don't suppose that would be an acceptable character in the Merithic Eye now, would it? Someone.
Well, I mean, we can we try and accommodate.
I understand that, but from like an IC perspective, they're like, why were we taking in this guy? Well, what are we doing with him? What?
Yeah, I don't think it'd be very fun because we'd have to actively be horrible to you.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind that from an IC perspective, but there's always it kind of bleeds IC and OC. I always see this time and time again. It even happens to me too.
Well, people like the idea of slave role-playing concept, but when it comes down to it, when you consistently when one side is consistently being an awful individual, and slavery roleplay done correctly involves a lot of beating, I'd imagine, a lot of horrible this, horrible that,
conditioning.
Yeah, and on one side, you're going to end up hating it. You're going to end up disliking your character, growing less sympathetic towards them because they're constantly just abusing another individual. And on the other end of the spectrum, the other person is just constantly being abused.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm not.
You're totally into that stuff. Don't lie to me.
Well, one thing I haven't touched upon. Sarinteal has an army of goblin slaves actually working in his mines. Part of the reason Solstice kind of raised to prominence to an extent is because Sarin delved into the earth and found out that precious minerals were down there on the merit of him being an enchanter and having kind of almost a sixth sense for these kind of things. Stones of power beneath the earth. And his favorite goblin slave, he shaved him, he painted him gold, he dressed him up, and he called him Remen. And he's now the head house goblin of Solstice.
So he has a goblin called Raymond after the dude.
Yes. He has a pet monkey as well. He picked it up in Phelan, where he has a pet monkey called Pelinal.
That's funny.
He had a goblin called Alessia, but she was caught in a landslide many years ago, and one of the famous jokes Sarinteal tells, and his sons tell it to all the all the fellow students of the Mages Guild abroad. They say, oh, Alessia died in a landslide, and our father called it the landslide of righteousness.
I get it.
Yes. So Sarin's kind of got a mean political sense of humor.
See, if I were to do an alt, if I were to do any race, I've always wanted to adhere to the, I guess, supposed archetype that goes with it, If I were to do an Altmer, I'd try to have him as somewhere around 80. I think that's usually young on the Altmer spectrum, just to make it a bit more relatable. Probably make him some sort of mage fellow who was just trying to come up in the world. Something I could keep it that relatable and grounded for myself. Hopefully work from there. If I were to do a red guard, I'd probably do it some swordsman of some who is, studying martial arts in an effort to better himself as a warrior. If I were to do a Breton, probably some sort of merchant or knight, something to adhere to what's there in the world so that it's believable in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't have too many of the quintessential archetypes for a particular race. I mean, I imagine the Nords, it might get a bit tiresome seeing how many drunken warriors there are. I don't know. I really haven't roleplayed in that.
Well,
but I imagine early on you were just inundated with these people.
Well, when it comes to my Nords anyway, for me, it's I took it and I flipped it on its head. So I looked at all the Nord archetypes and the quintessential Nord archetypes, and I said, well, okay, what if we took a magnifying glass and had a look at it? So much of the Nord philosophy is predated on honor and Sovngarde. Well, okay, what is honor? Is it a form of martial ethos that they use to keep the Nord society under control with the promise of some sort of carved out section of Aetherius for you? Is it something that Shore himself created to make sure that he'd have an endless supply of followers in his halls? That sort of thing. And from there, carved out a Nord who's not necessarily hardy or, anything of that nature. And I guess if I were to apply the same route to an Altmer, I would hold up a magnifying glass and I would say, okay, well, here he is trying to learn all that he can about his craft. But with that comes some sort of pressure, because when you are trying to do as best as you possibly can in a society where flaws are anathema, so to speak, that puts a lot of pressure on an individual, I would imagine. And how long would it be before he cracks under the weight of all that? That would be an interesting concept, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's similar in respect to Velasimir. It is, obviously following a different craft or field, but at the end of the day, it's about the toll of that high pressure.
Yes, with Velasimir though, as you said though, he's been reared on I think you said the stories of his mother has told him. So when you say that, I think of those fairy tales that moms might tell their children. He's trying to emulate that to a certain extent.
Yeah. He's got the kind of the fairy tale aspect, the romantic aspect of chivalry, and the praxis of those people all kind of balled up together. And
the tension there is what he's taught versus the reality of it all, I suppose.
Yeah. The world is going to disappoint him. It's going to be more and more disappointing the longer he spends in it.
Do you think he'll ever accept the world for what it is? Not necessarily continue to hold up to those high expectations of his?
I think if he's given the chance to, he might, yeah. It's going to take a very long time, probably longer than I'll be able to roleplay him.
Here's a question for you. Has anyone RP'd, being an immigrant in Summerset? Have you run into anybody like that?
Well, since Summerset launched, or in Oregon?
I would say since Summerset launched, since that's when you have a concrete reason for some sort of other race beyond the Aldmeri Dominion races to be there.
I think we're going to see a lot of it. I believe that there have been quite a few people who have made it their mission to immigrate to Somerset, but I've yet to see it.
What's your opinion about that?
Um,
the emigrators to Somerset? Are you more of like, get your paws off my island? It's my island, it's our island, dig it. What you doing here?
I think a large portion of the Altmer community are way too up in arms about it. Some people are genuinely offended by the change in the storyline, and the change in it's unprecedented in the Altmer history to open up the Isles like this. But and while my characters, they are not happy about it, I know for a fact that we would not be getting Somerset if it wasn't the case. If the borders didn't open, we won't get Somerset. So that's just the way it is. I accept it for what it is. I don't think it's worth getting upset about. I think what it does is it provides a situation where conflict and drama and challenge is given to the Altmer people, and that is only a good thing for roleplay. If you want to just sit around and rest on your laurels and just roleplay without any form of conflict, then you're not roleplaying at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think there are possibilities of immigrants joining the Merithic Eye?
We've already had something like that. We made an attempt once. We made a new rank for it before Summerset launched, because I think we kind of saw where which way the winds were blowing and whatnot. And while it's proven to be less than a stellar location for immigrants, because again, they'll just get pushed around. I do still invite it. I do still invite other races into the guild because I like that challenge to them. We do have a rank for it in the guild. What's it called? What is it called? Not Pilani. It'd be Pilani. It's Burro. For vassal, it's the rank is called Burro, and it's Aliadun for vassal or slave. So that kind of lends a specific
connotation.
Yes, yeah. So obviously, being Sarinteal, he'll say, Burro, and people are like, why are you calling me a slave? He's like, no, you're a vassal, not a slave. I don't want to own you. Yeah, so non-Altmer are welcome to join. It's just a matter of finding a place for them. At the moment, I think we've had a Forsworn in the guilds, vaguely. They're real. Normally, I'd say no to the Forsworn just because it's so far removed from what the Altmer were. But this role player is quite exceptional in her own right, and the character had kind of a unique outlook on the Aldmeri Dominion that it kind of, from an in-character perspective, it serves as an excellent proof of concept for Sarinteal, saying like, look, we can look at this savage. Look how awful her birth prospects are. Look how ugly she is. She's a human, and like she's just disgusting. She's a little gremlin and a mongrel and everything like that. But look how fantastically dressed she is now, thanks to us. And she's got the right principles. She's supporting the Dominion. You should too. He has the same outlook with his monkey, and Remen. He takes these awful things, and to his mind, he makes them better by shaving them and painting them gold and letting the pigment in the gold peel away at their skin by some allergic reaction. But, he shoves them out the door and he says it was a success.
Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it, I suppose. Not really. What was the reason again that Iran just decided to open up the Isles? So is that ever discussed in Summerset?
It is, yeah. I mean, there's the propaganda kind of moral standpoint of it, where she's like, we want to open it up to the world. We want to show that the Aldmeri are willing to accept all these people to the island, and we want to play a pivotal role in the future of Tamriel. But practical reason for it is Summerset isn't as well defended as it was. The Marines, the Navy, the Army, they're all away. They're all in Cyrodiil and stuff like that. So they're inviting all of these immigrants to Summerset, and then the Divine Prosecution are getting a hold of them and then turning them into a militia to ward off basically all of the threats Summerset now faces. So it's using foreign blood to protect their territory.
That's not all that different from the Roman Empire using auxiliary troops to defend the provinces. So that's understandable. I would applaud that move, actually.
Arm them, train them, send them home. What could go wrong?
Naturally, I would imagine that there were some quests that involved dealing with potential rebellious aspects then, if there are any.
It's not as obvious as you'd think. Yes, there is some element to that, but it seems more like it's more to do with the meddling of Daedric princes as opposed to a response to Iren.
Mm.
That's how it's played out. Like, yes, it's called the Court of Bedlam, and it's the alliance between Mephala, Clavicus Vile, and Nocturnal. And it recruits people in the same way that the Veiled Heritance did, in that it goes towards a disenfranchised among the populace and saying, like, hey, look at that filthy little immigrant over there. Don't you just want to, push them away? Why don't you join the Court of Bedlam, which, by the way, is an awful name if you want to hire Aldmeri to your cause, and fight for purity. Well, like, the Court of Bedlam has various layers, so obviously that's the surface layer. Is like, hey, for purity, man. Next layer is like, hey, actually, we want to remake the world, and then the third layer is what the three princes actually intend, which is not good for anyone, even each other. As for domestic revolt and stuff like that, there are kin lords and aldarchs and stuff like that who are genuinely politically opposed to Iren's decree.
I meant more so on the immigrants part.
So Iren's decree is about the immigrants.
No, I mean, so I guess the best example is, how there was a massive Muslim immigration, right, from the Middle East to the European countries, right, and that in and of itself has caused riots all over the place. There have been riots in Sweden and the Netherlands and such. So I guess the immigration riots, are those a thing? I guess is the more appropriate question.
So riots perpetrated by the immigrants?
Yes.
There's some mild grumbling, but otherwise no. The immigrants to Summerset are by and large portrayed as a benign element among the community. It's the Aldmeri who cause the majority of the problems, it seems. There are a few, and you speak to a couple of the immigrants, and they do express selfish reasons for coming to Summerset, but, also understandable reasons. So, by and large, no.
Okay.
Well, you asked me earlier what I would change about Summerset.
Yes.
And not only would I include crab riding, I would also ask them, I would also want them to flesh out the society more, because in the entirety of Summerset, you do not once see a member of the Thalmor. You don't see any active office. You don't see any representative. The Divine Prosecution are Thalmor, but that tidbit is tucked away. It's not advertised very well. You don't get to see the Thalmor in their element. You've got this stark, white, pale, perfect city, and I want to see the Thalmor prowling among it in black robes as like a shadow, like the shadows of the Aldmeri mindset.
I see.
But you don't get that, fortunately.
Okay, so crab riding and more presence of Aldmeri society, particularly the Thalmor.
Yeah.
Okay. I would add to that, and I would say perhaps a little bit more of Aldmeri customs being fleshed out. Like the Praxis Talisman is one very interesting aspect of it, and they also introduced the Path of Alaxon. I'd like to be interested. I'd be interested in knowing more if they're fleshing out how the social strata works within the society. I don't know if there's any lore already out on that, but I think they could have done that a little bit more with Summerset. Even speaking as a guy that hasn't played Summerset.
So yeah, there's no reference to the caste system. Obviously, I'm still acting as if it's part of their system, which I imagine it still is, but it's obfuscated behind various ranks and stuff like that. The way I see it is that as a human in real life, I'm I'm incapable of grasping the intricacies of Aldmeri politics and social strata.
I'm sure they could explain it in some way.
Yes, I'm sure they could, but
Yeah.
This is the way I reconcile it with myself.
Lore books, they're a thing. They've done it time and time again before.
Yeah, it would be nice if they did it again, but yeah, what is there is nice, but they could have done a bit more.
Right. Alrighty, so we've covered a lot of bases when it comes to your characters, and yet there's still so much to go on, really. Still, though, I feel that we've been able to have a good snapshot of you and your characters. I would venture to say.
I like to think so.
Well, unfortunately, due to time constraints, and the usual podcast length being around at least 2 hours or so, I'm afraid that we got to start drawing things to a close. And the way we go ahead and do that is through a 10-item questionnaire that was first used by Marcel Proust, then used by Bernard Pivot in his program called Bouillon de Culture. It was a French program. And finally used by James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. This 10-item questionnaire helps us get a more unconventional look at the way you think about things. And at the same time, it is creative, or people can get creative with it. So 10 more questions, and then we'll be done. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Alrighty. Number 1. What is your favorite word?
I quite like serendipity.
Number 2. What is your least favorite word?
Something.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, well, I suppose success.
What turns you off?
Boring people. Or people who are bored, rather.
What is your favorite curse word?
Yeah, probably cunt.
That's my favorite curse word too. I'm finally someone says cunt. Like that's usually listed as the least favorite word. So.
Well, it's because it's one of the few curse words that still feels like one.
No matter how much you use it, it still feels like a curse word.
Yeah, it's nice and offensive, so no matter who you call a cunt, they're going to be like, excuse me?
Yeah. It has that hard "k" in it, the sound in the middle, one syllable, all there is to it.
Yeah. Can I change my favorite word to cunt?
Sure. Okay, that can also work. Number 6. What sound or noise do you love?
I used to live in a large house with a lot of laminate flooring. and when my dogs were younger, I used to love the sound of their little claws running across it.
You're not the first to give me that sort of answer, actually.
Really?
So, yeah, the sentiment is actually understandable.
I also like purr, but it can get quite boring. I quite like a cat's meow. I can just sit and listen to a cat meowing at me forever, really. Which doesn't help them when it's dinner time and they meow at me for food. I'm just like, oh, it's not, it's not making me go any faster. I'm just going to sit here and listen to you.
Okay. No, the next one. What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, I hate the noise of shells rubbing against one another.
Like seashells?
Yeah, like seashells. Oh, my goodness.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, within that's plausible.
Yes. Or actually, no limits.
No limits. Oh. Shit, I don't have that good of an imagination. No, just a scuba diver, professional scuba diver.
What profession would you not like to do? Ever in a million years, they could not pay you enough to do it.
Probably telemarketing.
And finally, for our last question. If heaven exists, if it does, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Hey, aren't you that guy that role plays Aldmeri? Well, aren't you the best Aldmeri role player out there? And I'm just like, yes, God, got that right.
That's amusing. That's amusing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps this episode up. My thanks to you for coming with us on this expansive journey. This has been the longest episode to date. Let's hope that's a record that I don't have to beat. Sarinteal, my eternal gratitude to you for enlightening me on so many aspects of Aldmeri lore, as well as the great conversation that we had. I also do apologize to you all for the long wait this episode ended up having. It wasn't planned, but I hope that we don't have to cross that bridge again. With all that being said, I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you so much.